Okay friends, I just got done wiring up this big ass air compressor. I could not find an answer anywhere online telling me what size breaker I should be using for an air compressor like this. So I'm going to answer that question in this video. I'm also going to tell you some stupid mistakes I made while installing this so you can avoid it. So it's a twofer for you today. Let's just get straight into the amperage question. And I'll preface this by saying I am not an electrician. I might not be doing things up to code, but to my understanding of the way things are supposed to be done, this is how you're supposed to do this. So here's what we're going to look at. Ideally on the motor, but see I bought this thing used and it's all wiped out, but ideally on the electric motor, you'd have a thing here telling you what kind of wiring you're doing. So this one tells us 230 volts, 15.7 amps. So this is a 220 or 240 circuit. So you need a dual breaker. And 15.7 amps. Well, how many amps do we really need on that breaker then? 15? And the answer to that I thought was 30. I figured if I doubled this, I'd have lots of headroom. So when this thing kicks on and peaks, it wouldn't blow the breaker. I wouldn't get nuisance breaks. But then I found out putting a 30 amp on this circuit's probably a mistake. Now I wired it for 30. The wiring for 30 amps is fine. The problem is the breaker has to break at lower than 30 amps because if this motor starts pulling way too much amperage, it can melt down, it can catch on fire, whatever. So the rule is you multiply this rating on the side, 15.7, by 1.2, and then just round up to the nearest breaker. So the answer to that was a 20 amp breaker. So then I could use, if I wanted to, 12-2 wire, because I just need 2 leads that we're going to wire up. So we'll use the black wire and the white wire to wire to this thing, and the ground, of course. So that's 220 on a 20 amp circuit. I ended up using 10-2 wire because I wired this whole thing for 30 amps, realized my mistake and pulled out that 30 amp breaker. Now it probably wouldn't be a problem because there is a little red button on the side of this thing. So this is a thermal switch, and basically if this motor gets too hot, that thing pops out. If it's pulling too much amperage, it'll pop out and break its own, throw its own internal breaker. But we don't want to risk it, so that's why I switched mine back to a 20 amp. That was the right way to do it. What other stupid things did I do? Let's talk about those. So again, I originally set this up as a 30 amp circuit. So I overbuilt some of it, and one of them is the plug here. So this is like a 30 amp plug with a 30 amp wire, so 10-2 wire in a plug, and then I wired this plug to the motor, and we'll open this up and show you how I did that. This plug here is a NEMA, what is this? I don't know what it's called, NEMA something. NEMA 630R, so it matches this flat plug style. And I wired this in, again, figuring I needed a 30 amp, I didn't. Let's open this up and I'll show you how this is wired inside. Now, I did unplug this before opening this up, so don't freak out at me. Okay, let's get a close look inside here. Now, I will remind everybody, I am not an electrician. I'm not certified or nothing. But basically, I took this wire, took it up through here, through this little gap, tightened this down. Black wire, white wire, right? So these are my 2 leads. White wire went in the top, black wire went in the top right there. And we can see that the electricity going into the motor is coming out the bottom, right there. Can you kind of see that? So this is where your hot leads are going in, because this is a 220 circuit, or a 230 amp circuit, or 230 volt, whatever. It's a 220 circuit. And then my ground, I brought around down to here. There's a little ground screw, and it was a bit of a tight fit to get in here. Let's see if we can even see. It was a bit of a tight fit to get in here because I was using some pretty fat wire. So I put on one of these ring terminals here. If we can focus, I put a ring terminal on the wire and then screwed it into this grounding screw. So that's how we did that. And then once again, back at the panel, instead of a 30 amp, we did a 20 amp. And we ran everything. I ran this through this liquid tight conduit all the way up and around. Now, why did I use liquid tight conduit? Not because I needed anything to be waterproof, because I'm in a metal box here, but because the liquid tight conduit just gives me a little bit of abrasion resistance, basically. I didn't want to use hard conduit because I might move this. I'm moving stuff around in here all the time. Hard conduit's really expensive too. I didn't want to spend the money, to be honest with you. Liquid tight's fine. I could have probably used, if I was doing a 20 amp circuit with a 20 amp plug and a 20 amp wire going into this thing, I probably could have just used some metal clad wire, which I'm using all over the place in here. This wiring's a mess in here. Don't at me, I know, but it is what it is. But anyway, I just use this liquid tight conduit because it's flexible, easy to move around, easy to reposition stuff. There's where I made a mistake. So I was pushing 10-2 wire through it. And first I just tried to shove the wire through it, just tried pushing it in. And if you're in your 40s like I am, you probably know all about push and rope. You know what I'm talking about? It's not easy. It's not easy to push that wire through like 30 feet of floppy conduit. Then I went out and grabbed my my fish tape, and luckily I'd planned ahead a few months ago by spilling motor oil all over that fish tape. And so it made it really easy to slip that fish tape through the conduit. It was already pre-lubricated, so that was really smart of me to spill that motor oil on there. And eventually I remembered to wear some gloves too while I was pushing oily fish tape through the conduit. And then I used a proprietary knot that I was sworn to secrecy on to tie some baling twine to the fish tape. Drug it through the conduit, and then of course, when I was pushing the wire through the conduit and pulling it on the other end, because I didn't have anybody helping me, I busted the string off inside the conduit and my wire was abandoned. So then again, I was pushing the wire through the conduit. I'm a very intelligent person, I swear. I should have gone with bigger conduit, but the problem was, and there's a few problems with wiring it this way, basically my openings on these boxes were only big enough to fit this size conduit. So this is ½ inch, right? Now I could have got a box like this and done 1 inch, but I didn't want to oversize it and I didn't want to spend the money on that. So that was a stupid mistake. So I should have got a box like this with the big hole and used the big liquid tight conduit. My bad. I tried to be cheap and use the smaller stuff. So that was a mistake. So after some struggles, I got that conduit as flat as I could using a really brainy device, which is called a screw, screwed through the conduit and shoved into a brick so I could pull the conduit tight while pushing the wire through. We got it through. That was great. Everything got wired in at the box. I realized my mistake on putting a 30 amp on there, went to the hardware store, bought a 20 amp, and then went to wire on the service side. And that's where I discovered something else. Don't punch a hole through the center, punch it through the side, because this outlet sticks out so far, it just pushes into right where your wire is coming out inside the box. And I couldn't close this thing up, so I had to buy another box at the hardware store again and punch my hole through the side. So my wire's over here, and I had room for my outlet to push into the box. So yeah, punch that hole out in the side. Don't make 3 trips to the hardware store. Other than that, pretty trouble-free. Hope you learned from some of my mistakes. Now I gotta hook pipes and stuff up to this thing. We'll see ya.